Hi, step into my world with me and I will show you what I see. This is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden. Welcome to Shifting Perspectives. So, I had an extraordinarily wonderful evening last night. I went to a Halloween party hosted by a very dear friend of mine. This was the first time I was officially back in my old community after it's been about it's been a while, at least a year. It was the first time I went to one of these events with my community where I was there for the connection, for the network, for the community. My mindset was completely different the last time I was at a party or an event like that. So I was able to really take on a completely different perspective. Now, I have struggled with social anxiety and social awkwardness most of my life, and most people have. The reason why we have social awkwardness and social anxiety is because we do not know how to control or manage a conversation. We have no idea how to navigate a conversation. We don't know, we just don't know how to predict human behavior, to know what the appropriate thing is to say. The problem is it's improvisation, which is one of the last skills of communication that we have to master in order to effectively converse. So there's mimicking, repeating behavior. There's parroting, repeating information and data you've heard. And then there is improvisation or authorship when you make up your own stuff on the spot. The problem is if you have not practiced or mastered communication, you're not going to be very good at it. It is an acquired skill. Anyone can learn this. Everyone is equipped to master this skill. But fear and anxiety step in and it prevents us from effectively learning how to communicate. One of the ladies I spoke to last night was a senior. I usually don't talk to people over 60 because I don't have the opportunity usually, or I don't take it. Regardless, she was explaining to me her own communication skills and her own social awkwardness. And she was explaining to me the process that she underwent through her entire life, where she finally overcame her social awkwardness and was able to finally learn how to improv a conversation so that she could navigate conversation. When that happened, her anxiety vanished. And I explained to her that that's actually a stage of growth. It has nothing to do with her age. It has to do with how mentally developed you are, and that we don't reach that point of mental development until we hit milestones in our evolution, in our intellectual evolution, in our growth. So that it's not until we reach the eighth stage that we have the ability to finally master and learn effective communication so we can improv and navigate in social anxiety situations. The average person doesn't reach that. And you have to put in like X amount of hours of talking. It's literally a number. You have to clock in X amount of numbers of talking. But because of abuse in our childhood, we are stunted very early on. So we never overcome that. So this woman was explaining to me after she was in her late 60s that there was this block and she finally overcame the block and she could fluently navigate. And it's supposed to be around that eighth perspective that we finally clock in enough hours that we can start navigating conversation. So the more you converse and the more you practice, the more hours you're clocking in with communication. Once you hit that certain point of X amount of hours, I have no idea what the X amount is yet. Once you hit that X amount of hours, your communication is going to go from here to like here overnight almost. It's extraordinary. And this woman explained that she had the exact same experience, except it took her almost 60 plus years to clock in that many hours. Now, I'm in theater and I'm a podcaster. So, and I'm a philosopher. So, needless to say, I clock in a lot more hours than the average person, which is why I was able to hit X amount of hours a lot faster than a lot of people. Now, once you do that, your ability to navigate and maneuver in social conversations skyrockets. It's extraordinary. Now, assuming we hadn't been abused when we were children so that we were free enough to talk however much we wanted. We would have that ability to pretty much just talk indefinitely wherever, and we would clock in those mandatory hours a lot sooner. But we're not doing that. So, what you see with social anxiety is actually stunted growth in our ability to navigate fluently because we haven't clocked in X amount of hours. So, I was noticing, I got to this party and I decided to become a listener for the party. And I realized that there were two modes. Of course, there's two modes, there's listening and talking. Talking is it's output. It's you giving what's inside your perspective to other people. Right now, this is output. I'm giving it to you. Listening is input. Now there is a problem with listening. The problem with listening is you have this perspective, and this is all about perspectives. I have my perspective, and you have your perspective. And this is basically the exchange of perspective data. I talk, you take in my information, you listen to it, now you are receiving, and that is information you are now putting into your perspective. Now, it's not automatically going into your perspective. You are subconsciously stopping it, processing it, assessing if it's valid before you put it in. That's what the stages of grief are. You're actually processing, is this going to hurt my system? The reason why is because your system runs off of your logic, and it should. My system runs off of my logic, and it should. So that if I provide you with information based solely off of my data that's logical, and I hand it to you, that doesn't mean it's going to be logical for you because you have a logic system inside your perspective. So it's a defense mechanism to protect your perspective because your perspective is your reality. Your perspective is your mental health. So if you don't have boundaries and if you don't have filters, you're going to take in everything you hear and instantly apply it to your perspective without any filtration. That's the problem. Boundaries filter. Boundaries determine whether or not you receive something and it's going to go into processing. The better you are at filtering, the better you are at determining whether or not something should or shouldn't be added to your perspective. Now, in the case of somebody who has poor defense systems, that's poor communication and poor boundary setting. Same thing, absolutely interchangeable in psychology. The boundaries, your ability to speak, and your ability to say no or deny someone information access to your perspective is really vital to your mental health. It's vital to all of our mental health. And if you don't know how to do it, if you haven't been trained in doing it, or if you've been abused to undo it at an early age, which is most cases, you're going to take in all of the data. Everything you hear is instantly going to be processed in your brain in such a way that it instantly goes into your perspective, no matter how illogical. Enter the abusers. Now, we receive over 140,000 bits of information every day. People come in and they're saying shit and they're saying things. If you have no boundaries, everything you hear is going to go in as a fact and it's going to process right into your processing. When that happens, it's going to turn into your perspective, and your perspective is not going to be stable anymore. It's going to switch over here and then switch over here and switch over here. And it's going to switch however many times it has to switch in order to process and accept what it is you're hearing. This is what we call chameleon. Somebody who hears something and immediately assumes it's fact and repeats it. The problem is there's a lot of contradiction now. There's a lot of lie. There's a lot of illogic. And now there's so much inconsistency and illogic and insanity that the processing center creates invasive perspectives to compensate for all of the illogic in your mind. It's trying to make sense of the insanity. So it creates invasive perspectives. Now, a lot of those perspectives that come into your mind, a lot of those data points that come into your mind come with abuse. It comes with gaslighting. It comes with physical violence if you don't accept somebody's opinion. There's a lot of data. If it's negative, if it's disapproval, rejection, if it's a refusal or putting down, if it's doubt, if it's guilt, if it's shame, you're going to now associate rejecting data with abuse. I'm going to say that one again. You are going to associate rejecting data with abuse. So you're really going to receive everything, which is why boundaries are so important. Now, we talk about boundaries as something that, oh, we're protecting our physical body. And we think a lot like this. This is what we call concrete thinking. We're not thinking about what we're actually protecting. When you have your boundaries, it's not our physical person we are protecting. It is our perspective we are protecting. And in order to protect a perspective, you have to use physical words. Don't do that. That isn't for your abuser. That is not for their sake. That is not for your physical body to stay safe. It's actually protecting your subconscious mind. It is protecting your perspective. Because you've said the words, don't do that. Your subconscious mind can hear your own words, take that as processing, and goes, oh, that's not something we're supposed to take in. Got it, check it, make sure that doesn't go in it. We're actually saying it for our cognitive core processing's sake to protect our perspective. So when somebody comes at you and gaslights you or abuses you with words, they call you a name. Let's take it something real simple. Somebody calls you crazy. Now, if you say nothing, that data goes right into your processing to filter in. But if you say, don't call me crazy, processing is going to hear that and go, whoa, wait, wait, wait. We have contradiction. Let's evaluate this. That's exactly what goes on inside of our minds. Now you have two contradictions. Now it's going to stop and it's not going to put it right into your perspective. So it's not going to immediately assume you are crazy. It's going to assess, are you crazy? Which is exactly what you want. So now you start going through logical processing where you rationalize what does crazy mean? Crazy means not aligned with logic. That's all it means. So if someone gives you an absurdity, something that's just illogical, that's actually insanity. If someone gives you something that might be logical in their mind, but it's absolutely contradicting to your mind, that's insanity. It is just contradiction. So that when you hear that, you can process it your own. Well, no, I'm not crazy because my perspective is solid. My perspective is real. My perspective is aligned to my logic, which is aligned only to my experience. Therefore, I'm not crazy because everything is functioning exactly as it should be. So now you've managed to put up this boundary and push them away to protect the perspective. When you don't have the ability to set boundaries and you're listening to people, you take everything in. Once you become solid in your authority and your ability to lay down boundaries, suddenly you can be open to listening to people without it infiltrating your perspective. This is the best part of reaching the point of healing, is when you can finally open yourself up and listen to people subjectively without adopting any of their beliefs. It was the most, people talk so they can prevent listening as a method to set up a boundary. That's why so many people talk and never listen, is because they're using output and talking as a defense mechanism to replace their boundary setting because they are in no position to listen, because listening makes you vulnerable. I'm going to say that again. Listening really makes you vulnerable if you don't have boundaries. If you are not solid in your own belief, you are not going to be in any kind of position to listen. So people need to talk so that they can put up a defense, so that they can validate their own belief. And it's just this massive wall. Now, as a result, you get a lot of people who are just talking and no one's listening. That happens a lot, especially in New York. We are renowned for it. That's like a tourist thing that we offer here. Is absolutely no one listening to anybody else, because listening requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is something that, if you don't have boundaries, vulnerability is dangerous. Once you have boundaries, vulnerability is something you can wallow in and enjoy. Yeah, you can enjoy vulnerability. So listening and talking is 100% about input and output, and it's 100% based off of your perspective. Are you going to take your perspective and go output with it, or are you going to bring in more data? Now, the problem is, if you are not solid on your perspective, you're also going to doubt your own perspective and your ability to communicate and maneuver more social situations because you're not certain of your own perspective. That happens when we have invasive perspectives, when we've taken in so much that we don't even know what our opinion is anymore. So you can't navigate conversations such as politics or current events, sports, you can feel like, oh, I'm not knowledgeable about that. I'm not credible enough because you do not have any credibility in your own perspective. You don't have any support. You don't support your own perspective. The reason why is because it's not your perspective. It's somebody else's, to somebody else's logic. So really, when you are healing, what you are doing is completely cleansing your own perspective. That's all you are doing. So I was out last night and I was taking all of this in and I decided to become a listener. And that was the first thing, was the decision to become a listener. And I realized that I do my output all day long on my podcast. I'm constantly going on my podcast and giving output. So it was really nice to be able to switch roles and be a listener. The other thing I noticed that people are really comfortable with talking about themselves. That's good. That's very good. And I noticed that a lot of people wallow in the joy of being able to talk about themselves. They want to, it gives them joy, and they love doing it. It makes them comfortable. So I realized, okay, I'm walking into a social situation with all of these people. I'm going to give them the opportunity to talk about themselves because I don't like talking about myself. I hate talking about myself. Yeah, I really hate talking about myself. So I came up with 3 rules last night. The first rule was the questions, 3 banned questions were, what do you do for a living? Banned question. Where did you grow up? Banned question. And then the third question, I cannot remember right now. I'll have to look at my notes. Ooh, 111 again. So let me see here. Let me pull up my notes, my social experiment. Current events, that's the other one. Current events are banned at social settings because we're not talking about current events. So what do you do for a living? Where did you grow up? And current events. Right under that is the weather. These 4 topics are the topics that everyone defaults to when they're in a social situation, which is why they're banned, is because they're banned in this particular social experiment. And anytime anyone talks to me, these topics are banned because they are an easy out of conversation. It's like, no, I'm not going to do societal expectations. We're going to do original and authentic. So I came up with an alternative question. I love this. What do you want to talk about? And that's the question. I added a little tweak to it. What is your favorite topic to talk about at parties like this? And the reason why I asked that question is because, first of all, they get to pick the subject. So there's no discomfort. 2, it gives me immediate insight into them. And I'm the one at the disadvantage of knowledge, which is my happy place. Oh my God, do I love being at the disadvantage of knowledge? Oh my God, do I? Because I know how to navigate a lack of knowledge. I know how to ask questions. That's my comfort zone. That is my comfort zone, is asking people or is learning. So it puts me in an immediate learning position. They get to choose the topic. So immediately they're comfortable because they are the masters of whatever topic this is because it's their favorite. What is your favorite thing to talk about? Now, I've had a couple people where they were kind of confused about the question, so I had to clarify. And when I clarified the question, this is what I came up with. What are you most passionate, excited about to talk about in a situation like this? Like, what topic gets you so excited at parties like this that you just burst open? I got to talk about scuba diving last night. I got to talk about roads. Oh my God. Okay, I'll bring that down. Somebody explained to me vacations. 3 people, their favorite thing to talk about, me. That one I loved. A lot of people were like, myself. And then one person actually came back and said her job, which was interesting. That's the one about the roads. When I was 16, I watched the documentary on roads, how roads came into existence, the history of roads, the science of roads. the engineering of roads and the 1945 Eisenhower highway system that was built right after World War II. All of the roads in the United States exist because Dwight D. Eisenhower, basically after World War II, he did a caravan that went cross country from New York to California with a full military caravan just to celebrate, like a parade. And he found out just how horrible the roads were. There were no roads. And so he came up with this highway system that we have now so we can transport and move people from point A to point B. And it was extraordinary. She was an engineer of roads. She builds roads. She plans them out. There's blueprints. And I'm just like, wow. So I felt like I was finally, 30 years later, listening to this continuation of the history of roads. And I made it very clear. I was very happy about this. So this was like, and the more I asked the question, the first time I asked it, it was, I'm going to ask your help with my social experiment. I love saying that. That's how I segue into every topic. I need your help with a social experiment. And when people ask me what I do for a living, well, I'm a philosopher. And they want to talk about my work. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I will not talk about my theories outside of work. But then I will say, help me with a social experiment. And they're like, oh, a philosopher, social experiments, let's do this. And then I'll ask them a question. And I'm processing data left and right because now I'm going, wow, look at how easy this is, listening and controlling the situation, giving them what they want, where they get to talk about themselves and they get to educate me, which is phenomenal. And I get to learn and process the data and ask questions. Never, never was I bored the entire evening. Not once did I ever get to a point where I went, wow, this is a terrible subject. I wish someone would shut up. Didn't happen. That was extraordinary. That was really extraordinary because the real conversation was not about whatever it was they brought up. It was about what they love about it. That was interesting. And because I was taking on the role of the listener, I was able to hear all of this data and immediately put up this block to determine, is this information that's coming into me positive, negative? What is it? And I was able to feel that as it happened. The best part is because they were experts in what they were talking about, because they're experts in what they brought up, the information that they were giving me was solid. Like the scuba diver, she was giving me all of the data on all of the scuba diving information. And I said to her, I want to go scuba diving, but I'm scared. And I said, how do you overcome the fear? She goes, I never had a fear, so I can't help you. All right, I'm just going to ask you the questions that I am afraid of, and you can tell me if my fear is legit or not. So I went over like 4 questions that I had about scuba diving that were my fears. What happens if it's cold? What happens if you get hypothermia? What happens if you don't get to the surface too fast? Are you really wearing a breathing machine underwater? A lot of questions like that. And she was able to give me information and data because she has clocked in so many scuba diving hours that she's an expert. So suddenly I'm taking in data, trustworthy, solid data that I can now process and be like, this is good, valuable information. And it's logical because it's accurate and correct. And I was able to just dump that right into my brain. So I knew it was not going to harm my logic, which meant I could be vulnerable and listen to her and take it all in. And I connected with a lot of people last night because of this. It was extraordinary. It was also a fantastic way to introduce myself to people. Hi, I'm Anna. They give me their name, and then I was able to rebuttal with, I am a philosopher, and I would like your help in a social experiment. Fascinating. They're like, yes, what do you want me to do? I want you to ask or answer this question. And because I was making the question all about them, they flourished. It was amazing. So now, let me put it this way. By the end of the night, I was navigating any social situation. And here's the thing, the question is simple, it is precise, and it is generic. If you want to borrow it, if you want to use it for yourself, do so. It literally is the icebreaker, and it annihilated any and all social awkwardness instantly. It was extraordinary. And I was in control of the conversation 100% of the time. One guy did come out and said current events. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, this is, the data. He's like, current events. I love talking about current events. Then we got it. So we didn't talk about current events. There was another gentleman, there were 3 of us. We then got into why current events? Why would you choose that at a party? Like, what is wrong with you? We didn't say that, but and he explained his reasoning why current events. And then we had another person. This was the only situation where they this is amazing. Everyone else was given an opening, an invitation to branch out and tap into their authority to talk about something they love. And everyone grabbed it except one person. This person defaulted back to the script. I would ask you what you do for a living, and I would ask you, oh, and immediately there were three of us there again. The two of us were like, no, you can't ask those questions. He's like, but that's what, and we both said that's the problem is everyone's using them. They're not original. They're scripts. That isn't you. What would you want to talk about? And he had to think about it. He's like, what would I want to talk about? That's somebody who does not have their identity defined, established. That's definitely somebody who's in the first perspective subconscious mind where they don't understand, they're not pulling it. Now, all of this together, I had one woman who came back. Oh my God, did I love her? And she said, anything deep. No. She said the words to me, I want to talk about anything deep. My gloves came off. I went, a philosopher. And she said, yeah, I have. She had a bachelor's in philosophy or a minor in philosophy. I think it was a minor in philosophy. My partner was there with me and he went, have fun, Anna. And he just walked away. He's like, yeah, I know where this is going. I love him. Just pats me on the back. Have fun, Anna. And he left and I'm like, let's do this. I think it was 15 minutes and it was boom. It was okay, I'll be blunt. This was the first time I was able to talk to a philosopher. I have never been able to speak to a living philosopher before. So this was like I found a philosopher. Gloves came off and we talked. Oh my God, my brain juice, my brain juice. Oh, it was so wonderful. It was the best conversation I've ever had in my life. Brain juice. I was able to drop all of my shield, all of my guard, and just here I am. And it was just, so the night was over. Well, it wasn't over. And I also was aware that I'm a hermit. So I have to basically take social breaks. I have to like take time out and I know what it is now. This is beautiful. If you are a hermit, if you have a problem with social, there's two things happening there. Oh my God, do I love this. So you have all that input coming into you. That's all data coming into your perspective. You need boundaries, verbal boundaries to shield yourself from the verbal input. You also are taking in a lot of energy and that energy is bombarding you. So you also need an energy boundary. Now, I don't know how to do energy boundaries yet. I am still trying to figure that out. So I have to go and isolate myself so that I do a perspective cleanse and I do an energy cleanse. So it's really important for me to take time out to recharge in the middle of a social setting. If you are into human design, I am a 6-2. I am a sage hermit. I don't think I need to say any more. That's it. So whenever I'm in a social setting, I am like, I can't, I get about 2 conversations in and then I have to go be alone and just isolate. And then I can go back in and then I have to go be so every time I'm at an event, I actually scout out a private or alone place where I can go and completely re-cleanse and recharge. And then as the evening goes on, I observe again, and this is it really is there's observation and then there's listening and then there's doing your output. So I went from listening over to observing because I just got too tired to keep the conversations going. So I'm just like, all right, I've gotten enough data. Now I'm just going to observe. So I did a lot of observing. And as I said, my partner was there last night. So, wow. I'll have to talk separately on that because, wow, it's off topic, but it's a lot to reflect on. So my takeaway from this is Clock in your hours. Clock in your hours. Get as many hours as you can in talking. The more you talk, it does not have to be to a person. Just talk. Do it in front of the mirror. Do it on a podcast. Do it on a podcast. Do it on a podcast. Like, seriously. Like, I cannot tell you enough. It is so validating to talk on a podcast. And if you are incapable to receive comments because you have boundary problems, if you internalize, trolls are going to be the worst thing for you. So make sure that you have it set up so that you cannot receive comments, if that's the case. And for me, I cannot focus when I've got people chatting at me because it's coming in as an interruption, because I want to see what they have to say. So I'll be in a train of thought, and then I'll see something and then I'll stop my train of thought. So I can't do both. I cannot give a soapbox. I cannot do a lecture while I'm toggling the comments. I wish there was a way that I could turn on the chat at the end. Maybe I'll do like a full Q&A or something. I don't know, like a full chat. Maybe I will do that. Maybe I'll consider that. That'll be interesting. Or I just open up chat where it's like, okay, now I'm just taking in data. Now I'm just taking in chat. And maybe I'll do that once a day where it's like, if you guys want to chat, here you go. That way, because I can't do both. So if you do start a podcast, I strongly recommend it, but you don't have to take in trolls, you don't have to take in chats, and you don't have to take in comments. And if you have no boundaries, if you internalize, I strongly recommend you turn all of that off, because when you are very new at this, and very new at setting your own boundaries, where you are internalizing still, trolls are going to eat you alive because you are internalizing. So turn off the chat, turn off the comments, try it again. Talk, talk, talk. It's going to be awkward at first. It's going to be really weird. Think of it as a journal. Exactly that, except it's going to be a verbal journal. I have a D&D character named Furble, and I go Furble journals. So here I am, verbal journals. It's a little personal. Hey, Furble journals. Think of it as your verbal journals. And the more you practice verbalizing, the more you're clocking in hours. And in fact, it was my podcasting that finally clocked in the sufficient amount of hours I needed to finally get me to that point where I could now, and you'll see it, there are stages of speaking and communicating, just like there are stages of writing, just like there are stages of walking. It was extraordinary to get to that point and have it unlock. But you can't do it until you practice. And you don't have to practice with social people. You don't have to wait for other people. Like I said, do this. Do your own podcast, start it up. You can even make it private. Just talk. It's so important that you just talk. And it's going to feel awkward at first, but the more you clock in, the easier it's going to get for you. And you're going to get to a point where it's so fluid. And then what's amazing is your improvisation kicks on, your authorship kicks on, your confidence kicks on, your ability to articulate kicks on. Everything just turns on because you're practicing it. So instead of journaling every day, vlog every day, do a verbal journal every day and just go on and keep practicing. And if you love it, great. Just keep doing it. Absolutely. Which is actually what I started here. I have like the Queen's journals. Now it's that, but I had Psych Soup at one point. I had the Subconscious Dialogues. That's my journals. That was a safe space for me to be theatrical at a time when I needed a space to just be theatrical. And then I had Psych Soup and I had the Witch's Corner. Excuse me. The Witch's Corner gave me the safe space where I could openly talk about all of the supernatural stuff that I was referring to without fear of being called crazy. I think I'm going to open that back up again. I think I'm going to open Witch's Corner back up. Yeah. I want to. I feel it. Witch might be the wrong word, but at the same time, I think it's the right word. It just means something different at this time. So I think I'm going to go back to Witch's Corner, where I can talk openly and freely about the energy. Yeah. It's interesting because this is what it feels like. This is exactly what education feels like. Everything is separate. All the subjects are separate. And then all the subjects are the same subject and they all are linked. And then they're spanning apart again where they're all separate again. So it's more like they're ebbing and flowing, like they're moving. Everything is moving. When you start to realize how much everything moves all the time, it's amazing. So, yeah, that's one of the assignments I'm giving you. Blog, talk. It's extraordinary. And then for this, if you struggle with a social experiment, tell people social experiment, and then do not use these do not use these 4 questions. These 4 questions also will trigger you, not traumatically, but they will trigger you so that they will activate the social anxiety, because we associate these questions with social anxiety. These questions are absolutely linked to triggering social anxiety because there's no way out. These are dead end questions. There where there's no way out. What do you do for a living? Somebody's now talking about a job that they don't enjoy doing, and you are listening to something that they don't enjoy doing. So they are miserable. Where you grew up, in most cases, people grew up in a horrible place. Somebody said to me last night, really, that's a great question. I said, how many people had traumatic childhoods? He went, oh, and you're asking them about their childhood. Oh, it's like, can you tell me anybody who did not have a traumatic childhood? No. And I'm like, exactly. And now you're wanting to dig out detail about that trauma. So for a lot of people, it is a highly traumatic question. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And I'll say New York. New York City has this thing in the culture that's really difficult to maneuver. The question, where did you grow up? New York. Boom. New Yorkers are on you. Are you native? And that's exactly what it feels like. I'm from New York State, so I'm 3 hours north of the city. But this is how it goes. So where are you from? New York. Ah, are you native? And it's this feeling of, well, I'm from Brooklyn. Did you grow up there? Well, I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York State. Where? And it's this, you can't call yourself a New Yorker unless and until, which is true. Like it's part of the culture here. And there's a lot of people who claim they're a New Yorker when they really live in Jersey. A pet peeve of ours. But I'm from upstate New York, central New York, which is hilarious because if you live in Hoboken, across the river, 2 miles away from New York City, you're not a New Yorker. But if you live 3 hours away from New York City in the mountains, you're a New Yorker. See the difference? But you're not a New Yorker. No. So it's like a status and a hierarchy and a pecking order over here, but only with New York. It's really bizarre. I don't know if LA has it in London. I'd love to find out, but definitely here in New York, there's like are you a New Yorker? New Yorker? And if you're born here, if you're native, it's a whole nother level. So, and it's funny because everyone's welcome here. They don't give a shit. They want to know if you know the culture as a native, if you know the culture as a transplant, and if you know the culture as a tourist, or if you know the culture as somebody who's trying to figure it out. Like that's really what they do, is they're trying to evaluate how well you know the culture. Because how well you know the culture here is going to determine how legit you are in knowing your shit when it comes to New York City. It's a culture here. It's amazing. I love it so much. But every time someone asks, so where are you from? Brooklyn. Oh, did you grow up there? No. But I don't want to tell them that. It's like, can we just pretend I grew up here? I've been here since I was 2 anyway. I've just been in and out all over the place. Can we just say so now I'm like, in my heart, I've been here my whole life. Just in my heart, I've been here since I was 2. Now, I've had some people come right out and say, that's all that matters. It's like, thank you. Thank you. It's like, in my heart, I am a native New Yorker. Been here since I was 2. Let's just take that. One person last night, she's like, I've been here for 8 years. Ah, you almost have the status of New Yorker. It's a 10-year rule. Once you've been here for 10 years, you can say you're a New Yorker. It takes that long to learn the culture. So when it comes to the social experiments, what is your favorite thing to talk about? If you don't, the best way to navigate is put yourself in the listening role, give them the spotlight, and let them talk about themselves. Absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I am working on my clothes. I don't know what to say anymore. Like, subscribe, follow, comment. If I were to give you a call to action, I really need to figure this part out because it's really hurting my business. Take a look at my Linktree account below. Browse the city directory. Join my Authenticity City. Yep, I need to talk to my universe and figure out exactly what my call to action needs to be. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.